But I knew I'd told the Lord that I would serve him in whatever way he wanted me to. And so to walk alongside my husband as his wife in ministry, we've kind of shared ministry. If he's in ministry, I'm in ministry. Very, very dear and important to me. And we moved 2 states away and never moved back.
As a pastor's wife from my mom. So,
whom have I in heaven but you? And there is nothing on earth that I desire besides God. That is a challenge. You can't just, that's like one of those hymns you sing in church on Sunday. You can sing it and walk out the door. But if you read that verse and you pray that to the Lord and you said, there is nothing on earth that I desire besides you.
it's a big
Well,
claim.
there goes that big house. There goes the lake house. There goes the beach house. There goes, the retirement where you're playing golf every day and going on cruises, the rest of the time. I mean,
what's up, everybody? So this week is a special week for me. I was at home over Thanksgiving, and so I got the chance to record 2 special interviews with both of my parents. Many of you probably don't know, my dad's a pastor, and so I wanted to talk with my mom and see what it was like just being a pastor's wife. We go into a lot of different things in this episode. Let me know if you like it and what you think we should follow up on. I think it'd be fun to do a follow-up on this. It's just really fun. The older you get, you kind of see that your parents have a little bit more knowledge that maybe you should try to glean from them. And so that's kind of what this was. I just wanted to hear her perspective on kind of like the life that I grew up in. So it's not a conversation a lot of us get to have, but I think it was pretty good. I'm pretty excited about it. So check it out. Like always, if you like it, share the episode, show it to everybody else, and tell me what you want to see more of. All right, let's do it.
All right, so today I've got a special guest, my mother. So we're here recording in Clement Baptist Church, right?
Right.
And so I wanted to sit down and just talk for a little bit. Some people may not know that my dad was a pastor, and I wanted to find out what life is like as a pastor's wife from my mom. So very open-ended question. A lot of places we could go, I'm sure, but we're going to try to dive into a few areas and see how it goes. So first off, what would you say? Overall, pastor's wife, the 50,000-foot view, what would you say?
Well, to begin with, I think it would only be fair to say that I've only been the pastor's wife for 5 years, but we've been in the ministry for 40 years. So I've been the youth minister's wife, and I've been the associate pastor's wife, and now I'm the pastor's wife. And I think that each one of those roles comes with some different, they're just different. And so now I'm in the pastor's wife role, but I look at those who are serving in the youth minister role and the minister of education or the minister of music, all of those roles. And I think their wives play an important part in their ministry. As the pastor's wife, sometimes it can have challenges. It can have a lot of challenges, no matter which position you're in. But it also has a whole lot of blessings. And I think looking back on the 40 plus years that we have been doing this, I'm happy to have been in this position. I would not say there are women that I have met who said, I never signed up to be a pastor's wife. I didn't want to be a pastor's wife. I am so glad now that I'm not a pastor's wife if their husband has retired or changed positions. And so for me, I don't think I'll ever say that. I think I've been happy being the wife of a minister, whether it's been the pastor, the minister of youth, the associate pastor's wife. I've been happy in all of those roles because I feel like that's where God has placed us.
I think that, that's a good point. Like the different types of pastor's wife, for lack of a better term, of as a youth minister's wife, as a lead pastor's wife, there's a big difference there. And part of it is just the age and then maturity. But then, like the calling and the pressure.
And they each have their own pressures. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it was any easier being the youth. Well, it was different. There were different pressures, like you said, being the youth minister's wife or the associate pastor's wife. But I think sometimes people have a tendency to look at the pastor's position as the only real ministry position, where the youth minister and the minister of music and the associate pastor, or children's pastor, or there's so many different ways that you can have pastor positions. They all have valid ministry. So I think sometimes those people sometimes get forgotten. We are so blessed to be in a church right now that is so loving, and we just had Pastor Appreciation Month, really, in October, Pastor Appreciation Month, and people were so kind and did such sweet things for us during that month, and yet there are so many other places when we were in ministry in other places. I remember feeling like, wow, my husband is also a minister, and for him, I wanted that appreciation to be shown to him as well.
So like a more background type role, or not as forefront, and then you felt like they just didn't quite get the same recognition because the amount of time and stress is
maybe so.
Very similar.
Maybe so. I guess maybe I'm just sensitive to it because this is new for me being in the pastor's wife role. I'm sensitive to those people who may not get as much recognition for the hard work and the calling that God has placed on them, because their ministry is valid as well. So.
Okay. And then real quick to just give the history, you said you guys have been in ministry for 40 years?
Yes, we were married in 1981, and even after we got married, I'm from Richmond, and so, like I'm from Richmond, and our family was there, so Glenn took a year off of college. He was in school at that time, took a year off from college, and even just to focus on our marriage, for us to get started for 1 year without the pressure of school or other things. But we took up ministry there at the church that we were attending. We worked with the youth. We had them in our house. We talked to them on Sunday nights and did things with them. So we started out there, and then when we went back to school at Columbia Bible College in Columbia, South Carolina. We were there for a little while, and then Glenn was called as the minister of youth at a small church in Camden, South Carolina. And so we served there until he felt called to go to seminary, and then we went to Wake Forest, North Carolina, and he served at a church in Raleigh as the youth minister there. And then after seminary, he was called to another area in Fuquay-Varina, North Carolina, and he was the youth minister there. And then he went from youth minister to associate pastor. And we were there total 27 years, so it was a long time. And then God called us to leave that position and to be pastor here at Clement Baptist Church. So.
And here we are.
In
Clement. Bustling metropolis.
Yeah, Bushy Fork.
Bushy Fork.
Bushy
yeah,
Fork, that's Mills. Right. Yeah.
And, okay, so I think, that's a long time to be in ministry. And not just the different roles that you've been in, but just to see the way ministry is done, maybe just like the evolution of ministry over those 40 years has got to be very interesting, of just the changes that have happened just from church dynamics of how everything's the operational side of it to the type of music.
Oh, yeah. It's been very, very different. Yeah, we've gone from having full choirs to having praise teams. We still have a choir here on special occasions, which is wonderful. But, so the way that people worship, because everything is different now, and the church needs to be contemporary in the way that people think and the way that people receive information. The message never changes, but the way that we do things has to keep up. I mean, people read their Bible on their phone now in church. Never would that have happened 40 years ago, nobody had a cell phone, but that's just a small thing. But I think that the heart of ministry has stayed the same. One of the verses that I like to remember in this season of life where I am as a minister and as a minister's wife is I'm really not called to be any different than any other woman in the church. My husband just happens to be the pastor. And I think because of that, different expectations, people may look at you and think that you should, maybe do things a little differently. But Ephesians chapter 5 says this. It says, "Therefore be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and a sacrifice to God." And so for me, walking in love, I think is what we're all called to do. But I think as a minister's wife, I think that's especially important because I want to love every person who is a part of our flock. And each one of them is different. And so they all maybe need to be loved a little bit differently. But my desire is to do that, not because I want them to love me back. Now, that's nice if they do, but because that's what's pleasing to God. He loved me when I was a sinner, sent Christ to die for me, before I ever even recognized that love. And so for me, part of being a minister's wife is I need to walk in love to those who he has brought us to serve. And like I said, I'm really no different than any other woman in the church. I am a wife. I am a mother. Praise the Lord, I am a grandmother now. That's a wonderful role to have. I'm a sister. I'm an aunt. I'm a cousin. I mean, I'm a lot of things. And so I think sometimes maybe it can be a challenge for people to remember that as ministers' wives, that we're also all these other things too, just like them. And while our primary focus as our calling is to minister to the needs of the church and help in any way we can, I asked one time, "What do you expect from me?" in the role that I was in. I said, "What is it that you expect from me?" when we were interviewing for at a place where we were going to be called to serve eventually. And the response was, "Just love your husband." Yeah, and I thought that was such a great response. Now, I feel like that is certainly the most primary thing, to love my husband and to love the Lord. But practically, we also have to love the people that we're called to serve. But I appreciated that because it showed to me that the people were concerned about our family. Because if your husband and wife aren't united together in love, then it's going to be hard to have an effective ministry. So
Yeah, and I guess thinking there really is a role that you play as the pastor's wife. It's not just like, oh yes, my husband is the pastor of this church. Sometimes I go to a different church, but there really is a expectation of, I don't want to say behavior, but there's duties to say. Like there's things that you're going to do that you're more expected than the average person, but that it's a salary of for one person's on the payroll, but your connection makes there be a little bit extra. And so that's one thing I was thinking of. Was there any times where in y'all's ministry that you've felt like there was extra burdens put on either you or any of the other pastors' wives that you felt like were, and not to throw anybody under the bus, I'm just curious.
Right. Well, for Glenn and I, we entered into our even our dating relationship, knowing that both of us were called to serve the Lord. Glenn in the church, and me, I wasn't exactly sure how I was called to serve the Lord, but I knew I'd told the Lord that I would serve him in whatever way he wanted me to. And so to walk alongside my husband as his wife in ministry, we've kind of shared ministry. If he's in ministry, I'm in ministry, kind of
Right.
thing. And so if he's going to be here serving, I'm going to be here serving. There was a very wise woman when I was had just gotten married, and she was an older woman. I knew her from many, many years ago, and she was actually working in the office I was working in at that time. And she was a very affluent woman, and really uh, had a life that I really wasn't, not the same type of life. Anyway, she had said to me, she said, do you think you're really ready for what's ahead of you, being being a minister's wife? Are you sure you can do this? And I was a little bit offended by that. I thought, well, of course I can do this. I love the Lord. I love my husband. Why do you think it's going to be so hard? And I have thought back many times on that and thought, she had more wisdom than I gave her credit for because there have been challenges along the way. It's hard to share your husband with so many people. It's hard to see that your husband's time has to be so fully devoted to the needs of the church. There were times, I know, when you played baseball, you didn't play for a long time, but for a few years there, you played Little League Baseball. And there was Monday night visitation. And so your dad couldn't come to any of your Monday night games. And it just really hurt my heart that he couldn't be there. And I didn't, I always, was afraid that would bother you. But he needed to be at visitation. It was outreach. He had to be there. And then there were other times. Vacations get planned around Bible school and church camp and all of that. And Christmas, just depends on how Christmas falls, whether or not you can go home and be with family and those kind of things. So there were some times that it was challenging. And sometimes if you weren't careful, you could, pout a little. I could pout a little bit about some things. But I have also shared with people on more than one occasion that we can never give God more than he will give us back. We've been studying this year in the book of Mark. Glenn has been going through that. And there's this part of Mark chapter 10 where Jesus is talking to the rich young ruler, and everybody's familiar with that. And the rich young ruler is more in love with his possessions than he is with following Jesus. But that's not where I'm going with this. He goes on down and he's talking about how difficult it is for those who are wealthy to enter the kingdom of heaven. And then Jesus says, "Truly I say to you, there is no one who has left house or brothers or sisters or mother or father or children or lands for my sake and for the gospel who will not receive 100-fold now in this time, houses, brothers, sisters, mothers, children." And that section of scripture has always spoken to me because I did leave my family behind, my sisters and brother, very, very, my mom, very, very dear and important to me, and we moved 2 states away and never moved back. And so, and then things that we've given that I feel like other people maybe didn't give as much as we did consistently. They didn't have to make the same kind of sacrifices, but I feel like God has richly blessed us in so many other ways. And so I try to encourage other wives who are in ministry that, yes, you're going to give and you're going to sacrifice, but you are doing this for the Lord. And he sees it. And he is going to, I hate to use the word repay, but I guess in a sense that is nothing that we give to God, nothing that we sacrifice for him is going to be shortchanged as we are blessed back by him. And that's not the prosperity gospel. I don't believe I will ever be rich because I have given, because I've tithed and, that I don't think I'll ever be a rich monetary richness. But there are so many things that God has richly blessed my life with. And I try to think that that those are the eternal things, the things that will last, the things that I have given up for things that will last, then I'm going to be repaid not just in this life, but in the next, in that I will have offerings to lay before the feet of Jesus. And so sometimes I think that we can get very caught up in the comparison game. And I'm going to speak now maybe a little differently than where this question was going to, but there are pastors out there who make a very, very good salary. There are pastors who make way more money than we would ever see. But the majority of pastors, the majority of ministers do not make a lot of money. It's not the kind of calling that is for someone who is really in love with the possessions of this world. And so sometimes there are things that you lack when you don't have a lot of money. And you have to learn to be content there. You have to learn to be content with not having the newest car or not having the biggest house or not having, whatever it is. And this morning, actually, I was struggling with this morning because we are 65 and we're going to be retiring at some point, I would think, in the next, 5 years. And the thing that most people do when they get close to retirement is they are making sure they've got everything taken care of so that once you retire and you don't have an income, your house is, the roof's on there, you've got good windows, you've got your kitchen remodeled the way you want it, all of those kind of things. And I was getting ready to go for my walk this morning. I was putting on my shoes, and I don't know why, but I was just thinking about that and thinking, oh my goodness, I know such and such person, and they're doing such and such to their house, and they're going to have it all ready when they retire. And we don't even have a clue where we're going to live. We don't even have a house. What are we going to do when we move, Lord? What are we going to do? And I've given this to him 100 times, and I take it back. And my devotion this morning, I just want to share that because I thought it was so applicable to me where I am, and it also, I think, applies to every woman, not just pastors' wives, but it had to do with envy. And now I didn't really like thinking that what I was doing about my house was envy. But when you boil it down, that was envy. I was jealous of these other women who had homes that they were getting ready for retirement. But it talks about the fact that we look at our life and we compare it to others, and we may forget God's blessings and what he has placed before us. James 3:16 states, "For where there is envy and selfish ambition, there is disorder and every evil practice." Envy is a pesky seed that brings weeds to one's life and ruins fruitful gardens. In its grasp, there is chaos in relationships, priorities, and our value. Envy can be a quiet killer of joy. And went on to talk about how the enemy wants us to compare ourselves to others because it forces us to take our focus off of Christ. And as I read this, I thought for a few minutes about some of the ways that God had taken care of us in the past. There was a time where you're our firstborn, and then Megan, our daughter, she was very young. She was still drinking formula, and we were pretty, poor church mice is what we were. That's exactly what we were. And one night, it was kind of tight on the budget, and one night there was a knock at the door, and we went to open it, and the UPS man was there, and he said, "Is this such and such?" And we said, "Yes." He said, "Well, I've got something for you." And this was before Amazon Prime, where people, had packages delivered all the time now. So we were like, what's coming to us from UPS? And so he comes rolling up to our door, and he had a dolly filled with boxes of formula. There had to be 4 big boxes of formula there. And we were just overcome. We were like, oh my goodness, how did we get this formula? Well, God knew that we needed formula because formula was pretty expensive. And but God met that need. And we found out later that a nurse at our pediatrician's office, the the company that made the formula said, "Is there anybody you'd like us to share this formula with?" And she gave them our name and address. So,
Wow.
God uses people as His hands and feet. And another time where we had a car when we were in seminary, and it needed to be repaired, and we didn't have the money to pay for it, so we were going to put it on our credit card, which we hated to do, but you got to have a car. And when your dad went to pick it up, the lady handed him the receipt and scrawled across the receipt were the words, "Jesus paid it all." And again, God is so faithful to take care of His children. And so as I was reading this and convicted this morning about that envy, I think I say that to remind other pastors' wives that God sees us. He sees where we lack. He sees where maybe we don't have all that we would like to have, but He knows what we need. And in the Lord's Prayer, it says, "Give us this day our daily bread," because He's going to provide for us what we need today, not what we need in 5 years. So He's so faithful.
Now, I want to go back. You said, just to clarify, I think that was really good, but I was curious. You said sometimes you felt like you sacrificed more than others. Were you meaning in ministry, or just other people that were at the church, or just other people that you knew in life?
All of the above. There are every husband and wife team is different. Some husbands and wives serve the Lord together in ministry. Some, the wife is not going to be totally as invested as I am. I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm just saying that there are some women who I never chose to have a career because I always had to have a job. I always had a job because we needed that. But there's a difference between having a job and having a career where you have to truly be focused on and pursuing, climbing the ladder and those kinds of things. And there were other ministry wives that we've known that chose to do the other. Their husband was the minister, and that was fine. They attended church, and they were there, but they were never fully immersed and invested. You can't do both. At least I haven't seen it very well done, if it is done. And then, because everything, like I said, everything about our life revolved around the church, and still does. Everything that we plan in our life revolves around the church. And sometimes it's, you can feel like, well, why doesn't everybody's life revolve around the church? Especially as a believer,
right?
Why aren't we all totally invested in everything that's going on, every ministry opportunity that is there? So,
okay,
does that answer your question?
I think it's a good point of, you can't serve two masters isn't quite the same, but like you only have so much energy, and choosing to have a more lucrative career comes with the sacrifice of the opportunities to be more involved in the ministry and the hands-on work.
And I don't fault anyone for choosing the other. It's just for Glenn and I, that's not how we could do it. We had to both be totally invested in it. And so that was our choice to make. It's kind of like people going on the mission field. When you go into the mission field, it's everybody. Everybody's in on that. The children are in on that. Everybody's got to be all in on that, or it's just not going to work. And so we kind of approached it the same way. I mean, you all were so great. You were involved in everything at church and growing up. And so it really did make for family ministry.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that I did want to touch on was having kids and being involved in ministry, and more of the front of the line. I don't want to say that's but the people that people see in the church, people that are associated with having kids, is what kind of I mean, there's so many questions I want to ask, having been a pastor's kid, of just like the expectations. Do you get the people? I mean, every church has the people who are too involved in other people's business, but did you feel any added pressure of how your kids behaved being a reflection of how good you were as a parent, or
Oh,
there was a
absolutely.
standard that was upheld of like, oh, well, your kids have to behave well?
Oh, I absolutely felt some of that pressure. Yes. There was a time that you did something at a pool party, and I was just horrified that you had done that as the associate pastor's son. So, yes, I remember those kind of things. But I also tried to not put those expectations on you all. You may have felt like I was putting them on you. I hope not. But I tried
I don't think
not.
so. I never felt it, but I was curious what you felt more from the church body. Not to
We
throw any particular church under the bus, but
we have been so blessed in the churches that we have served in. Every single one of them from the get-go has just been so loving and graceful with us. And I don't know if it's because I had blinders on and that's all I chose to see, and I didn't acknowledge the other. And there were a few bumps along the way, maybe, but for the most part, the people in the churches that we served really loved you all so much, and really wanted to encourage us in who we were as parents. Um, I I'm not exactly sure how to answer that, except that we loved the church and they loved us back.
yeah.
And that's why that verse out of Ephesians about walking in love, when we left the Camden church, Camden, South Carolina, when we left that church, they gave us a little reception, and it was just so sweet. And I cried through most of the reception because I loved those people so much, and it was just breaking my heart to leave them. And I told your dad, I said, I'm never going to love another church like this. Never. It is too painful when you have to say goodbye. So the next church that we went to, we were 45 minutes away. He was in seminary. So we really didn't have the opportunity to be as involved as we were. But I also knew that I had a wall up, had a big wall up, because my heart had been hurt when I had to say goodbye to these people. And so I say that because I think that we were just so loved by people. I did feel some expectation, but I think I put more of that on myself than the church put it on me. And that comparison game sometimes, and the fact that you say, oh, my husband's the pastor, our children have to do such and such, they can't do such and such, they need to wear such and such or not wear such and such. Yeah, there was a little bit of that, but I don't feel like it was ever, nobody ever came to me and verbally said, look, your kids are, you're the associate pastor's wife or the youth minister's wife, your children should not be doing such and such. Nobody ever came to me and said that.
Yeah.
Which is really good. I really appreciated that.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like there are places where that does happen.
Yes, I have talked to people where it does happen. This past year, we were fortunate enough, and if you are a pastor's wife out there and you were not aware of this, the Billy Graham Training Center at the Cove, they do all kinds of programs all through the year, but they have 4 pastor renewal retreats, and we've been to 2 of them. And there are people out there that donate money so that pastors can come, and you don't have to pay for your lodging or your food. You pay for your study materials, which is not much, but such a wonderful place to go and to be renewed. And I've kind of lost my train of thought. What were we talking about here?
Well, just like the pressure of
the pressure.
Kids, but then the idea of kind of, say, but like the burnout that, I mean,
Yes.
It really is ministry burnout,
Yes.
anything but ministry, especially
Yes.
and then the opportunities that are out there.
Yes. So what I would say is you need to get a brochure from the Cove and look at the dates and apply to be a part of one of those. There has to be space in the one that you apply for, but to be renewed together as a husband and wife in ministry, and if nothing else, to see your husband renewed in his ministry is such a wonderful thing. And while we were there, this is where I was going with it. While we were there, they had never done this at any of the pastor renewal sessions before, they told me, but they had a time for the wives to get together. And there was such an amazing amount of people who shared the pain that they had experienced in their church. And other ministers' wives were able to stand up and share encouragement with them and give them another perspective, maybe even talk with them afterwards. But you really need someone as a minister's wife that you can be honest with and share with. And it's probably best not for that to be somebody in your church.
Right.
Which is hard because your whole life revolves around your church most of the time. And so to be able to find a friend outside of church, sometimes it takes a while to do that. But as ministers' wives, we have a unique position, and the typical person is not going to understand where you're coming from when you're talking about some of the struggles and some of the pressures and just some of the jobs that come along with being a minister's wife. They're not going to really understand those from the same place that another minister's wife will. I have been blessed throughout the years to know so many different ministry wives and to be able just to share with them and talk with them and find out, well, what is going on in your church? How do you handle this? That kind of thing. And I do have one friend who is not a minister's wife, and Glenn and I together, a couple, and they have been wonderful. We've been able to just be us. We don't have to put on any pretense. Not that we try to put on pretense with others, but sometimes that, when you're with people, these are people that look to us as their pastor and their pastor's wife. So you cannot be totally
your role is
free.
24/7. So you're not fully comfortable. I get that.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people, but specifically the church, is finding, is the importance of community in that relational, like that idea of retreats where you're just around people who go through the same thing, but also they're not there every week. So you can say, this drives me crazy. Am I crazy? Or is this something that I should be concerned about? Is this how everybody else does it? And just feedback, venting, all that. And just, the idea of being burnout, and, your weekends are very different when you're in ministry.
Yes. You don't really have a weekend. Yeah. And even if your day off is Friday as the pastor, you're going to be working. The only way that you are not working is if you are gone. And then you're going to get calls and you're going to get texts or emails, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that because you always want your flock to know that you are there for them, and because you love them and you care about them. But again, you have to, everything about your life revolves around the church schedule. And so it can be overwhelming. And we were very fortunate. We only had 2 children. Some people have 4 children, and that's a lot. You look at kids that are wanting to play soccer and, volleyball and dance and all of those things, and trying to find a way to balance all of that and allow your kids to just be kids, not just the pastor's kids.
Yeah.
Sometimes it could be a little challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, there's that balance of forcing the religion onto people, onto your children, versus letting them develop their own faith.
Yes, because if it's not their faith, it's no faith.
Right.
It can't be my faith. Yes.
And you don't want them just to be actors of.
No.
I've definitely met some pastors' kids from other places, and you can tell they're pastors' kids, and then you're like, I also can tell I don't believe anything you're saying because I just know that you played a role where you were and you know how to turn that on. And this would be kind of specifically, I'm thinking about a few people I've met in a Bible school type role, or in other places like maybe with YWAM, where I've met some other pastors' kids, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I see the facade that you have up, and I can be like, I know that a lot of that is fake just because of growing up in the church and seeing that. But
It can happen. I would say too that I think that every parent prays for their child, but I think as ministry parents, I think we have an even greater um, urgency to keep our children prayed over. Um, the enemy wants nothing more than to destroy a family, but if he can destroy a ministry family, well, then it's a greater score, I think.
yeah,
And so I think as pastors' wives, I think it's really important that we not just pray for our husband and his ministry, but pray for protection for our children over the enemy and the way that he seeks to plant those seeds of discontent. And even in our heart, like me, I had that seed of envy today, but that even in our children, that they would not be attracted to the things of this world, but would see, beginning in their parents, um, what faith in God is all about and how faithful God is. And we were very fortunate, as you know. We were involved in the ministry with the Gideons International for 30 years. And one of the greatest blessings to me through that was the fact that you were exposed to so many other Christians around the world who were living their faith.
yeah,
They were really living their faith. It wasn't just somebody who was going to church on Sunday because their parents made them, but these were people who were living their faith, and other ministry pastors and things like that. So that that was probably such a great blessing to our family, to help our children see more than just church.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was not just the culture of the travel side of it, which was great, but yeah, just getting to meet people from different cultures and having a better worldview at a younger age was something that I was really thankful for, especially in our situation. They were able to provide a way that we were able to travel and do all these things. But then, yeah, that worldview of saying, oh, yeah, like I know people from, all these countries in Africa and Europe and East Asia.
And not just their culture, but the fact that God was at work there.
Yeah.
And to hear how God was at work and to realize God is so much bigger than the little building that we can put him in on Sunday, if that's all you have in your faith,
Yeah.
is that one little building.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to think where. Oh, one thing I wanted to go back to, where you had said that you had met some people who said, like, I never wanted to be a pastor's wife. I think that's a interesting thing to go down of just, was it that they were married and then their husband got a new calling and then they just didn't feel like they were in on that decision? Or
I've seen both. I've seen marriages where early on they knew that this was going to be the route that the husband had been called to, and they were fine with that, but they were never going to be fully invested in it. It was going to be, well, that's his job. Like, if you're a plumber, you go to work, and then the wife goes and does her job. Well,
Yeah.
it's like it can be like that. And then others where, yes, somebody was a banker and they decided, no, I feel God calling me to the ministry. And so then they're already married. They're going down one path with their life, and then God changes it. And so I've seen it both ways. And I think it all comes down to, what are you going to hold on to? If God's called your husband to ministry, for me, it's just like, man, if God has said it, let's do it,
Yeah.
And so that whole obedience. And another thing that we've been studying in Mark is Jesus says, you got to deny yourself, pick up your cross, and follow me. And he doesn't always lead the way to the places that we think he's going to lead us. And we've got to be willing to be flexible and realize that I think sometimes we have such a temporary perspective on life, as far as instead of an eternal perspective, and to say, you know what, this is a short life I've got here. If I thought I was going to go this way and God says, no, we're going this way, well, I'm going to follow him, because I've only got a few years here anyway. I'm going to do what he wants me to do because I love him and he's called me to do that. So I'm a little simplistic when it comes to those kind of things. It's like, if God says it, let's do it. And this is where he calls. And when we came here, it was totally evident to us, or several things that just really solidified the fact that God was calling us to this place. And so how do you say no to that? So.
Well, having left, so the last church you said you were there for 27 years.
Yes.
Did the wall come down from, you said like the South Carolina church got too close, the Wake Forest church or wherever that was, not close enough, but then being there for 27 years, I mean.
Yeah, the walls, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a home. That was where you guys you grew up there. Megan was married there. Y'all went off to college there, while you were there. You were baptized there, gave your hearts to the Lord there. I mean, just those were our people. We didn't have any family, so they were our, they are here in North Carolina, but
Right.
they were our family. I mean, when we had celebrations, they were the ones that were a part of it. And it was a tough. I didn't realize at the time how tough it was on me making that change emotionally. But
which change?
Moving from there to this new place where
Okay.
God had called us. Yes. It took me a little while, probably a good 2 years, to realize, you know what? I think that was harder on me than I realized. There was a whole lot of emotion, cutting the cord with a lot of people that we loved. And so it was hard. But it was the right thing to do. And we love the people here, and making new relationships, and still have the relationships there. We just don't get to see them every Sunday.
Right. And that church really did love very well. They always made me feel very welcome when I would come back to visit, and there was a true like family atmosphere there. I just wasn't sure. One, I guess, if when you move away, if some of that felt like, I know sometimes when pastors move to different churches, it can be kind of messy. This time it wasn't. But if there was any like falling out between going from one church to the other, where you just be like, oh yeah, or was it more of just the relationships? If they've fallen, it was more just we've just lost touch. There was no like hard feelings.
No hard feelings. When we left that church, they celebrated our leaving in a manner that was saying, God has called you to something new, and we are excited about that. So we're excited for what God is going to be doing in this next phase of your life. And so, as I mentioned about being at the Cove, that was one of the things that one of the pastor's wives shared. They had been at a church for a while. I don't remember how long, but they had been called to another church. And the church that they left was very mad at them, just very angry at them that they would leave. And it just broke my heart, because you don't tell God no.
Yeah.
Well, you can. You can tell God no. We know how that worked out for Jonah, though, don't we? And I didn't want to be swallowed by a whale. And so, But my heart just broke for this girl because the church had the opportunity to bless them in what God had called them to do, but instead they gave them guilt and they gave them anger. And so that's why I say there are people who have been through, as a pastor's wife, I have really been so fortunate in the way that people have treated me and treated our family, I feel like. Because there are people out there that have very painful situations, people who have been very ugly, people who have been very just spiteful. And my husband Glenn doesn't tell me everything either. There are things that if there's been a bad something with somebody, he may not tell me. There was one church we were in, and he told me after we left that church, he said that the woman you sat beside in choir, this is some of the things that she would be saying about different people. He said, but I knew you had to sit beside her in choir at choir practice and on Sunday. He said, and I wanted you to be able to completely love her, which is what we're called to do, even when someone is not nice to us. And it's really hard to do that when they're not nice to your husband or they're not
Yeah.
nice to your child. It's
Mhm.
very, very difficult to love the way God, with that agape love that God wants us to love with. And so no, the church fully embraced us as we came to this new calling here at Clement, and the church here has just been so wonderful. They've embraced us and loved us, and um, yeah, like I said, there are women, there are pastors' wives out there who have been through very, very difficult times. And I'm not done with this. I may have one of those too. I hope not. I hope not, Lord.
Yeah.
But if I do, I hope that I will handle it with love
Mhm.
and love even those people who are not kind.
So, with moving to this church and a whole new group of people, what was one of the biggest challenges going from a church where you've been at for a long time, where you knew everybody, to here, even though you felt very comfortable
Yeah.
and confident in the calling here? What was the biggest challenge?
Probably the biggest challenge for me is the fact that I didn't have any history with anyone here. Everything was brand new. And not only did I not have history with them, but they didn't have history with me. And I think that was the hardest part. They didn't know you and Megan. They didn't know our grandchildren, where our other church, walked through all of Megan's pregnancies with me and,
Mm,
all of that. And so I think that was the hardest thing because it's the community, like you were talking about, how the importance of community and relationships with people. And so I think that was the hardest part for me, having to come in because I love people, but sometimes it's a challenge to begin new relationships. And there were several people in this church, women in particular, is who it was, that really reached out to me and tried to draw me in and make me a part of some of the community. And so I always felt welcomed by everyone else, but there were some people that just really went the extra mile. Um,
yeah.
and
This church
and
has a good Southern hospitality
yes,
mindset.
yeah, it does. They are very loving and very inviting. They want people to know that they're important and that they matter. Yeah. So
Nice. Yeah, and this church is a little bit more remote than the last
yes,
church you were at.
yeah.
Do you notice a difference? And I mean, the culture is a little bit different.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
And I think that's going to be I think you need to be aware of that everywhere you go, that you can't compare everything to where you were before. It's all new. People are different. The way things are done is different. And as long as you can find a way commonly to love the Lord, to share the gospel, and to work together for the kingdom, if you can do that, you can be in any kind of culture,
yeah,
as long as you've got those common things. It's amazing what loving God together does to draw people together. Yeah.
okay. And
Yeah.
then, so What would be one thing you wish people understood about being a pastor's wife that you think may not be obvious?
Wow, that's a good question. I think off the top of my head, I'm going to say the pastor's the one that went to seminary, excuse me, went to Bible college, went to seminary, did all this training. And while he was doing that, I was working so that we could have food on the table and insurance for the family. And so I did not have all of that training. And sometimes I think that people, and sometimes and I may put this on myself, but I think sometimes people expect that you have the same kind of depth of knowledge and wisdom that your husband does. And I'm just another woman, just like everybody else. Now, I love me some Bible study. I love being in my Bible, and I think we are all called. 2 Timothy is it 3:16? Study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman who needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. And so, we are all called to be in our Bible. We are all called to know God's word. And so maybe being the pastor's wife, I should know a little bit more. I don't know. But
So you felt pressure if they were to say, would you lead the Bible study? Like you were going to bring some sort of extra level of knowledge?
yeah, there can be some of that. There can be some of that. Yeah. Okay. Well, you're the pastor's wife. Would you like to do this? And I love to sit in the back of the room and not be in the front. A lot of people think, oh, you love being on the stage. I don't love being on the stage at all. I love being in the back with my Bible, studying and listening. I don't have to be the one up there. If it's needed, I'll step up and do it because God calls all of us. Peter, always be ready to share what the hope that is within you. And so we should all always be ready. And sometimes it can be intimidating to have to stand up in front of people. Some people are very, very shy. And thankfully, I am able to stand up and be in front of people without being real, you know, self-conscious in the fact that I get nervous or I'm going to throw up because I've got to speak, nothing like that. But there are some people who are that way. That's just their personality. And so I think sometimes people expect the pastor's wife or the youth minister's wife or the, associate pastor's wife, any of those, minister of music's wife, to have the same gifts and skills that their husband has. And that's just not always the case. They're different people, but we're all called to serve the Lord. And I'm not called to serve the Lord any differently than anybody else. Every believer is called to serve. They're called to serve. Every church member is called to serve. And if you're not, you just I think you need to take that before the Lord and say, Lord, what am I supposed to be doing to serve you?
Yeah. Well, now that gives me another question is, are there times where you've seen people who are not, I don't want to careful how words, because I don't want you to feel like you're getting trapped by this question, but are there times where you've seen people who are just not really doing anything for the church, like you're talking about serving, but yet their heart is willing or whatever? And do you feel like you have the power to be like, hey, you should get involved in this? Or why are you not involved in anything?
Oh,
that's
I would never
my side is a little
challenge
bit more confrontational. So
yeah,
that's
I'm not confrontational. I would never challenge anybody. I would invite somebody, but I've known enough ministry people to know that there's a common saying in ministry circles, and it's probably in a lot of circles, not just ministry, but 20% of the people do 80% of the work, and that's just I see that play out no matter where we've been. That has been pretty accurate. There may be some exceptions to that, and I can think of one in particular, but it's just part of it. But the thing that bothers me is that the people who are not engaged and involved are missing out on a blessing that they will never even see. It just, like I said, God is just so, so good. There's a scripture that's so dear to me. It challenges me, but it's very dear to me. And this is what, when I get concerned about the fact that, like I was talking about, we may not have a place where we're going to live when we retire. It's out of Psalm 73, and it's verse 25. Whom have I in heaven but you? And there is nothing else on earth that I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. So it doesn't matter how poor I am. It doesn't matter where I lack. God is my portion. He is going to be enough. But the verse before that, our ladies were talking about this not long ago. Whom have I in heaven but you? And there is nothing on earth that I desire besides God. That is a challenge. You can't that's like one of those hymns you sing in church on Sunday. You can sing it and walk out the door. But if you read that verse and you pray that to the Lord and you said, there is nothing on earth that I desire besides you.
It's a big claim.
There goes that big house. There goes the lake house. There goes the beach house. There goes, the retirement where you're playing golf every day and going on cruises, the rest of the time. I mean, you can't love those things more than you love God. There's nothing wrong with those things. But if that's where your focus is and you choose to be a part of that as opposed to being a part of the work that God is doing, every day. And so I just people miss out on a blessing if they don't love the Lord that way and want to serve him.
Yeah, it's a good word. Good word. Well, I think we could probably go on for another hour, but is there anything else that you would like to say that I haven't given you the opportunity to say?
I've probably rattled, and I don't know if anything I have said has made sense to anybody, but I would like to say to other ministers' wives out there, well, I would say, don't give up. Don't give up. Be faithful. Do what God has called you to do. Love people. Love him. Love your husband. Pray for your husband. Join him in ministry. And just like that scripture that I read out of Mark 10, we are never going to outgive God. And even though there are times where you feel like, Lord, all I do is give and give and give, he knows that. He sees it. He is going to honor that. And it may not be in this life, but it may be when we stand before him. Just like in Hebrews 11, all of those people that we love to read about, Moses and Noah and Abraham and Sarah, all of those people, none of them received the full reward that they were looking for until they came into the presence of the Lord. And so some of them had some, Abraham ended up with lots of wealth. I mean, there were lots of things that people had. I'm not saying that God didn't bless them, but their full reward was not going to be fulfilled until they got to heaven. And so I think that we sell ourselves short sometimes when we look for everything to be given to us in this life by the Lord. And we want to be storing up treasures for eternity. So I don't want to make it sound real like sappy spiritual. I don't want to do that at all, but really that's what it is. I mean, we really have to be looking at what with an eternal perspective on what we're doing with our lives as ministry women. And I say, love your people. I am learning more and more how little I know about love, though. I say I want to love people, and then something will happen, and the Lord will say, you thought you had this love thing under control, and look at you now. Look what you're thinking. And I had realized how fall how I can fall short in that area. So I just say, but love God, love people, and trust Him. He's faithful to walk beside us. We're not alone. We're not
Yeah.
alone.
That's good. Well, thank you. And
thanks for.
if anybody ever wants to come out here, Clement Baptist Church.
We'd love to have you. That's right. Come on out here.
This is the private library we're in. I think it's open to everybody. But man, old book, good books. So
Truth never changes.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Thanks for watching the whole thing. Hope you liked it. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, if you want to see more, tell me what topics or questions you would like in the second interview, and we'll go from there. All right. Have a great week.